There are moments in history when a man does not so much seize greatness as stumble upon it, as though the universe itself had planted a trap. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, was one such man. He marched out as a Roman, fought as a soldier, and returned as something altogether unexpected, a servant of the cross. And if that transformation doesn't strike you as astonishing, then I dare say you haven't been paying attention to the story. Now let us be clear. Constantine was no saint, at least not in the tidy, haloed sense of the word. He was a politician, a general, a man of ambition and power. But therein lies the peculiar genius of history and perhaps the peculiar humor of heaven. For what Constantine's story tells us is not that he was perfect, but that he was necessary. He was the right man, in the right place, wielding the sword of Rome to do the work of God. Before Constantine, the Roman Empire was an empire of contradictions. It claimed to worship reason, yet was steeped in absurd superstition. It called itself civilized, yet fed Christians to the lions for sport, and it prided itself on law and order while trampling the innocent underfoot. Into this chaos marched Constantine, armed with little more than his legions, his cunning, and, if the story is to be believed, a vision of the cross shining in the heavens. The skeptics will tell us, of course, that this vision was merely a hallucination, a trick of the mind, to which I reply, does it matter? Constantine acted on it, and in acting he changed the world. He declared, in effect, that the empire of the Caesars was no longer enough, that Rome itself must bow to something greater than Rome. And the strangest thing of all is that it worked. Consider the absurdity of it. Here was a man who took the most brutal instrument of torture the world had ever known, the cross, and made it his banner. He led an army, not with the old pagan gods on his side, but with the name of Christ on his lips, and he won. If this is not divine comedy, then I do not know what is. But Constantine's greatness did not end on the battlefield. No, his true genius lay in what followed. He did not merely tolerate Christianity, he embraced it. He called for the Edict of Milan, that great charter of religious freedom, which declared that no man should be punished for worshiping the truth. And yet, even this was not enough for him. Constantine was not content to let the church exist in shadows. He wanted it to shine. So he built churches, he convened councils, he gathered bishops and scholars to settle disputes about the faith, disputes that might have torn the church apart had they been left unchecked. It was Constantine, after all, who called the Council of Nicaea, where the church affirmed once and for all that Christ was not merely a teacher or a prophet, but the very Son of God. And if you think that was an easy task, try getting two theologians to agree on the color of the sky. Now there are those who will say that Constantine's motives were mixed, that he embraced Christianity not out of piety but out of politics. To which I say, of course they were mixed. The motives of all men are mixed, from the shepherd in his field to the saint in his cell. The remarkable thing about Constantine is not that he was flawed, but that, in spite of his flaws, he accomplished something eternal. For what Constantine understood, perhaps better than many Christians of his time, was that the truth of the gospel could not be confined to private piety. It was not a faith to be whispered about in the catacombs, but a truth to be shouted from the rooftops. He saw that Christianity was not merely a religion, but a revolution, not merely a creed, but a kingdom. And so, in Constantine, we have one of the great paradoxes of history. He was a Caesar, yet he bowed to a carpenter. He was a warrior, yet he carried a cross. He was a ruler, yet he submitted to a higher rule. And in doing so, he reminds us of a truth that the modern world often forgets, that real power does not lie in wealth or armies or empires, but in the willingness to serve something greater than oneself. So let us remember Constantine, not as a saint or a hero, but as something far more extraordinary, a man who saw the eternal in the midst of the temporal and who dared to act on it. For in the end, it is not perfection that changes the world, but faith. And Constantine, for all his faults, had faith enough to move an empire,